Hello, everybody. Hello, Teresa. I am glad to see you. I hope you are still doing well. We are bracing for another round of hurricanes down in Florida, but it doesn't look like Georgia should be impacted at all, which would be a blessing because y'all don't need any more. Florida doesn't either, but we'll take what we can get where we can get it, I guess. How many hours, if you know off the top of your head, I'm assuming since you're here for each of these that you're a licensed clinician. You may not be. But if you are a licensed clinician, do you know how many hours of training the state requires for becoming a clinical supervisor? In Florida, it's 12 hours. In Tennessee, I'm pretty sure it's 30 hours. So there's a really broad range of required hours for clinical supervision. So I'm just trying to get a feel for that. Hello, Alyssa. Welcome from Alaska. It's always great to see people from the West Coast. I know it's a little bit early there, but always glad to see you. And the same question to you, Alyssa. How many hours are required for being a supervisor in Alaska? $30 hours. Okay. Does it have to be live supervision, live classes, or can it be on demand? 30 hours of live would be a lot and probably cost prohibitive. So I'm hoping it's on demand, but I don't know. The states seem to kind of do their thing irrespective of cost. Okay, awesome for on demand. We do have a lot of supervision hours that are already on demand, but I'm updating those. And Florida actually used to be 16 hours and they dropped it to 12 hours, which is a blessing in some respects. In other respects, I never felt when I was teaching the 16-hour course that I actually got through everything in a reasonable time. So, who knows? Nobody asked me my opinion about it. So I'm just trying to do what each of the states, or as many of the states as possible, require. Hello, Dee Dee. Hello, Lori. Glad to see y'all here. And I know I can go through each state statute and find out how many hours are required for clinical supervision. I was just kind of being lazy and asking those of you who are captive audiences if you were aware. Hello, Bridget. Good morning. One of the things that can be challenging a lot of the times is that, at least providing CEUs, is that we have, in many states, we have 4 to 6 different boards that we need to try to comply with their regulations. In Florida and a few other states, they have what they call a composite board. So LCSWs, LMHCs, LPCs, and LMFTs are all licensed by the same board. But most states don't do that. They have a separate board for mental health, for social work, for marriage and family therapy, for addictions counseling, for pastoral counseling, for rehabilitation counseling, for psychologists. So keeping up to date with all of those regulations and stuff can be somewhat onerous at times. Hello, Dallas and Christine. Hello, Shad. That's interesting, Alyssa. Tennessee also has the same thing where supervisors actually have to get supervision, which is causing a big bottleneck in people actually being able to become clinicians because there aren't enough supervisors that are available, and there aren't enough supervisors to even supervise the supervisors. So I don't know what they're going to end up doing that. doing with that. But it's certainly an issue, but one we're not going to solve today. I hope everybody that has tuned in the past couple of minutes is doing well. I am really looking forward to today's presentation because it's a fun one. We've been doing a lot of really heavy presentations, and this one is, in my opinion, just fun. And why do I say it's fun? Because it helps us explore and get curious about why people do what they do instead of labeling people as resistant or treatment failures or something. And please don't label people as treatment failures. Treatment failed them. They didn't fail treatment, but I digress. So we're going to talk about a lot of that today and hopefully give you some excitement about going into some of your sessions with people who are not as motivated right now or who are stuck, and approach it with curiosity. So let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on developing momentum in therapeutic relationships. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. Today, we're going to talk about the ideal momentum in a therapeutic relationship, what that looks like, causes of stuckness, or if dare I say resistance. We'll review phases of readiness for change and appropriate interventions to enhance readiness, and we'll explore issues in the therapeutic relationship that may lead to stuckness and interventions. Remember, it takes less energy, just like if you're driving your car on the interstate versus in the city, it takes less energy to keep moving than to stop and start and stop and start. Every time you start again, you need a little bit of oomph to get going. What we want to do is help people maintain their motivation and maintain their forward movement. If you have ever been a runner, you know that it takes more energy to start running from a dead stop than it does from a walk. And we're going to talk about plateaus today too. Sometimes people need to catch their breath. They need to walk for a minute, but that's very different than getting stuck and just kind of stopping. So what causes stuckness? And that's a question that a lot of people ponder. Some people don't have the time or energy to do what we're asking them to do. And we need to be realistic when we don't want to just assign homework assignments or have them do things between sessions or maybe even expect them to come every single week if they don't have that kind of time. We also want to make sure that we set goals accordingly, where they're not trying to accomplish something that should take 4 hours in 1 hour. The task could be too overwhelming. It's too huge. They're sitting there going, oh my gosh. And I know a lot of people have tried to get in shape before, have tried to lose weight, and losing 2 or 3 pounds, okay, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Losing 20 or 30 pounds can feel really overwhelming. And some people may think, oh my gosh, what's the point? I'm never going to succeed. I'm never going to get there. And my grandmother struggled with her weight for the entire time that I can remember. And she was always up and down 60 pounds. And it was a battle for her. And it was very overwhelming for her because every time she would have a setback or relapse, gain the weight back, it would take a little bit of her self-confidence away. And so that eroded. Some people, again, will have no hope. Maybe they've tried changing before and it hasn't worked. So they're like, why try? Why should I try to do this? Putting it in a mental health perspective, if we're talking about clinical depression or anxiety, maybe they've tried before and it hasn't worked or it hasn't worked well enough, and they don't feel like anything we have to offer them is going to make a difference, or they don't feel like what we're suggesting is going to make a difference. And that is a nuance that we're going to talk about today. We really want to understand the client's opinion of what we're suggesting. I tell my clients on a regular basis, if what I suggest seems like it's silly, I usually say stupid. I don't like the word stupid, but I say it. If what I suggest doesn't seem like it makes sense or it doesn't seem like it'll work, tell me. Because not every intervention works for every person. Not every intervention is something every person is even willing to do. Instead of just not doing anything, tell me, yeah, no, doc, not going to do that. Okay. If that is your preference, if that is your choice, then let's find something for you to do instead. And help them recognize that there can be hope. They're not a failure. Their depression or their anxiety is not hopeless. What they've tried before hasn't worked, so let's find something new. Fear of failure or rejection, and they kind of go hand in hand. If I try this and it doesn't work, then I'm a failure. Or if I try this and it doesn't work, I'm going to be rejected. And that is something that is very present for a lot of people who have insecure attachment, who need external validation. A lot of times, they're afraid of failing us. They're afraid of letting their loved ones down. They're not even thinking about themselves. They're so terrified that they're going to let others down that they don't want to try. They may not have the skills to do it. You're asking them to assertively communicate with their significant other about their thoughts, wants, and needs. Well, gosh, number one, they have to be mindful and aware of their thoughts, wants, and needs. They have to have the self-esteem and the courage to be vulnerable and express their thoughts, wants, and needs. And they have to have the skills of assertive communication to do that. And while it may be something that we think is super easy, and I'm just going to put that on day one, there are multiple skills that somebody has to have to be able to do this effectively. And they may not know how to do it. And they may not say, I have no idea what you mean by that. I mean, yes, thoughts, wants, and needs I get, but what is assertive communication? How is that different than how I'm talking to you right now? We want to, if we're going to ask people to do something outside of session, we want to make sure that they can do it in session. We want to have them model that behavior just to make sure they have the skills and tools that they need. And if they don't, then we can provide them. We can back up and provide the learning so that they can take those skills and turn them into practice in real life. A lot of times people don't know where to begin. By the time they come into counseling, their world feels like it's falling apart. And a lot of times therapists have difficulty knowing where to begin too. It's like, okay, your autonomic nervous system is out of whack, your sleep is out of whack, you're in pain all the time, you're angry, you're irritable, you're depressed, you've got relationship problems, and they end up writing a treatment plan with like 15 goals. And the person looks at it and is like, I can't do all this. What's important is to identify a beginning point. Any positive change you make in a person's life is going to have reciprocal positive effects. If they start addressing their negative cognitions, that's going to help reduce stress, which will take pressure off of their autonomic nervous system and may help improve their sleep. So you're doing this over here, but it's impacting everything. One of the things I do with a lot of my clients is I say, okay, first we define their rich and meaningful life and what the difference is between where they are now and their rich and meaningful life. And then I say, okay, tell me which one of these things you are most interested or most motivated to work on, because they're not going to be motivated to work on everything. And that's where we start. And then we start talking about setting small, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-limited goals. Some people don't see a reason to change or the connection of change to achieving their rich and meaningful life. We need to connect the dots. If I'm asking somebody to go to the doctor and get blood work done, they're scratching their head going, Doc, I came to you because I'm depressed. It's a mental health issue. Why are you sending me to my physician? And they won't do it. They need to understand the why. They need to connect the dots for why we're having them do things. Just like anybody in the workplace, you ask your supervisees to do something, they may say, why do I need to do that? And they need to understand why. When I ask my clinicians to do their documentation, thankfully, I generally don't have to explain why, because they know if I don't do my documentation, we don't get paid. If we don't get paid, I lose my job. Pretty clear. So yeah, we don't like doing documentation a lot of times, but if the person understands why, it can help increase their motivation. What does stuckness look like? We've talked about why people get stuck, but what does it actually look like? How do we know if we're stuck or our clients are stuck? Behaviorally, we may have people who avoid coming to session. They regularly cancel sessions or they procrastinate doing things. Or on the other hand, or maybe in addition, they overcommit to other things. Yeah, I'm going to work on therapy, but I'm also going to build a house and get married and start a new job. And hey, let's start a family too. Okay, it looks like they're trying to do a sprint forward, but they're actually sabotaging themselves and ending up sort of stuck in the moment. Perfectionism is another way that we may envision stuckness. When people are working on improving their relapse prevention skills and they just don't want to move on to the next thing. They want to keep fine-tuning and fine-tuning and fine-tuning. There's a point of diminishing returns. And yes, is it important to be mindful of it? Yes. Is it important to fine-tune it occasionally? Yes. But if you're staying stuck on that one issue so you don't have to address these other issues, then that might be stuckness. And we, as clinicians, we want to help people explore, why am I avoiding this stuff out here? Why am I trying not to move forward with those things? Emotionally, when people are stuck, they tend to be more irritable. I think we can all think of times we've set goals and we've gotten stuck and we felt irritable. They may have a low frustration tolerance. They're trying to do it and they just can't move forward. So they're just like, oh, screw it. And it's important to help people manage their distress during this period of time. Some people, if they can't do it 100% the first time, or if they can't do it instantly, they give up. And they're like, I can't do it. So they're stuck. And we want to explore what is contributing to your low frustration. What is causing you to get angry when you can't do it right away and give up? In what way is that protecting you? And then we have anxiety. If somebody is afraid of moving forward, afraid of success, afraid of failure, afraid of disappointing others, then they may get stuck. And then they start getting afraid that they're not going to be able to achieve. So there can be a lot of different fears that are actually working against each other. And then there's just apathy. If I'm stuck, I may just not even have the motivation to try to do one more thing. Yeah. Could I keep my logs every day, do my mindfulness journals? Yeah, but why? If we start seeing apathy, it's important that we address it and explore, is this intervention not working? And if so, then what do we need to do to alter it? Or what do we need to change it to? If that's not working for you, let's find something else. If they are apathetic because they're starting to feel hopeless, then we need to help them see the progress that they've made, their successes, and recognize what success looks like. Even if you're not progressing in this particular goal at this particular time, Maybe you're on a plateau here and other things in your life are actually getting a little better. So we want to help them define what success looks like, help them seize on and acknowledge those successes. Yes, we're going to acknowledge the failures. We're going to acknowledge the backsliding. We're going to address that. But it's important to help bolster people's sense of hope. And cognitively, when people are stuck, they may overthink things. I'm feeling depressed right now. So why am I feeling depressed? What could I do? And then they may even go onto YouTube or something and get 50 videos on coping with depression and watch all of them, but never implement any of the tools. They're stuck. They're overthinking it. Instead of using what we call rapid cycle change, they see a problem, they look at what might be some possible options to address it. They choose what seems to be a good option. They try it. If it works, great, keep doing it. If it doesn't, okay, pivot to the next thing. And rapid cycle change is great because you can do it rapidly. Each week or each 2 weeks, you can add new interventions, modify interventions, change interventions based on the person's response. If they've tried it for 2 weeks and it just doesn't seem to be working for them, okay, let's figure out what to do about that. Confusion and brain fog can also happen when people get stuck. They may feel like I'm doing all the right things and I just can't seem to move forward, and then they start getting frustrated and angry, which triggers a lot of stress chemicals in the brain that can contribute to brain fog, difficulty thinking clearly, irritability, and then just forgetting. And that kind of goes back to the apathy. If somebody forgets to do their assignments in between sessions, or they forget to come to a session, that may be a sign of stuckness. They're feeling like they can't, for some reason, they can't move forward. They don't know how. They are afraid something. They are stuck in that quicksand. So what do we do to keep momentum going? And we're going to talk, we got a lot of slides to go through today, but I did want to provide some useful tools at the beginning. And y'all have heard me talk about it so many times, and I'm going to talk about it a whole bunch more. Sleep. When people are not getting adequate quality sleep, they have brain fog. They tend to be more irritable because their stress response is activated. They have difficulty clearing the adenosine, which contributes to that brain fog. They have difficulty controlling their thoughts, and they have more intrusive and negative thoughts that are difficult to control. If you're trying to help somebody move forward, all of those things are going to negatively impact them. When you don't get enough quality sleep, you're tired. Let's face it, we're fatigued if we don't get good quality sleep. And it's hard to be motivated to do much of anything if we're tired. Momentum is progress. It doesn't have to be huge leaps. You don't have to be taking leaps and bounds forward. It can be baby steps. But think about it. If you make one baby step each day for an entire year, that's 365 baby steps. You've gone a long way. Or, one baby step each week. For 52 weeks, you've made 52 baby steps. And depending on the issue, we want to help people manage their expectations. My husband's aunt, unfortunately, fell and hit her head, and she had bilateral brain bleed. And essentially, she has the traumatic brain injury is giving her a lot of symptoms of stroke. So focusing on small, manageable goals for her, like opening her eyes, like wiggling her toes. That's where we're at right now. Those are her baby steps. For somebody else who already has those capabilities, the steps may be a little bigger, but we do need to manage expectations based on the severity of the illness, manage expectations for progress. Nutrition. the body needs nutrients to make the neurotransmitters to help you learn, to help you heal, to help you manage your emotions, to help you feel emotions, all kinds of things. So if you're not giving your body the building blocks it needs, you're going to have more difficulty getting momentum, staying motivated, thinking clearly, all that stuff. Nutrition's important. Pain management and health will do these together. If you're in pain or if you're sick, it's really hard to get motivated and keep momentum going. You're thinking, all right, I'll get up and I can do this, this, and this. Maybe I can't even make it to work today. I don't have the momentum to be able to keep doing that today. I'm stuck home in bed. And momentum and motivation are similar but different. Motivation is the desire to do it. Momentum is the ability to do it. I can be really motivated, and if I'm doing it, if I've got momentum, then I'm moving forward. It's a process. And do 15. And I put this under physical because it's kind of a behavioral issue more than a cognitive issue. Sometimes the worst part about doing something and getting started is getting started. Doing 15 is something that I learned during my graduate program. If you don't want to do something and it just sounds absolutely dreadful, then all right, I got to do it. Let me do it for 15 minutes. If I'm still miserable in 15 minutes, then I'll quit and I'll try to pick it up again tomorrow. Most people find that when they start doing 15, they lose track of time. Getting started was the worst part, whether it's going out and trimming the hedges or writing in your journal or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. Doing 15 is a behavioral step that people can take to try to start getting that momentum. Remember, I said with momentum, just like when you're running, it takes a whole lot more energy to get started than to keep going. So we need to help people figure out how can I motivate myself and kind of push myself to get started. Once you've done it for 15 minutes, you've got that momentum going and it's easier to keep going. Interpersonally, seek support and accountability. This may look like somebody who holds you accountable. It may look like somebody who's doing the same thing, so you got a battle buddy. It may look like somebody that is there to provide you encouragement when you just don't want to do it. But support is very helpful. With internet and online chat rooms and all that kind of stuff, it's actually pretty easy for people to find support even 24 hours a day, because there's a lot of countries that, especially for English-speaking people, I should say, there's a lot of countries that speak English. So even if you're communicating and getting support from somebody who's not in the U.S., you may still be able to find somebody at 2 a.m. who's awake and online who speaks English. We want to separate the behaviors from the person. If you fail at this, all right, we chose the wrong strategy. It doesn't mean you're a failure as a person. It doesn't mean there's no hope for change. It just means we chose the wrong strategy. And inventors go through this all the time. They try something, and I'm sure the Wright brothers had many failures when they were trying to design the first airplane. And they tried something, and it didn't work, and they were like, well, crap. They didn't say, oh, I'm a failure, I can never do this. They said, well, that didn't work, so let's try something different. And we need, as clinicians, we need to be flexible and responsive to that. Instead of saying, well, keep doing this. Or if somebody's coming back through your program, we used to have this where I used to work. If somebody's coming back through your program for the 4th, 5th, 17th time, clearly, what you're doing helps them to a certain extent, but it's not getting the job completely done. They're hitting this plateau. So it's important for us to consider, maybe we need to refer you out for services we can't provide here, or to get interventions, or maybe we need to use interventions we haven't yet tried because the traditional way is not working for you. Help people focus on what they've done well and done right. When people are stuck, it's easy to see that mountain that they've got to climb as huge and ominous and overwhelming. And it's easy to focus on the negatives. It's easy to get stressed. We want to help people acknowledge, yeah, you got a ways to go. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. You got a ways to go. And look what you've done up till now. Number one, you survived. And that's huge. You survived until now. And let's look at the small successes that you've had. If it's sleeping through the night, if it's having a couple of good days in the past few weeks, whatever is incremental progress for that person can be really helpful in increasing their perspective so they don't feel like they keep doing this and they're never going to succeed. And then hardiness, commitment, control, and challenge. Focus on what you're committed to. And I should have put this under cognitive, but I didn't. Focus on what you're committed to in your rich and meaningful life. If it's your relationships, if it's your mental health, if it's your physical health, whatever that goal is, you're committed to that. And then looking at that goal, what things about that goal can you control? Because you're not going to be able to control everything about that goal. You're not going to be able to control your hormones. You're not going to be able to control whether your kid's up all night and you get no sleep. So some things you can't control, but some things you can. So what is within your power to control? And then view that as a challenge. View forward progress, keeping momentum as a challenge. How can I keep myself going a little bit at a time, pacing myself so it's a marathon, not a sprint? What do you do to keep momentum going? Emotionally, distress tolerance skills, super helpful. We talked earlier about how when people get stuck, they may feel exhausted, overwhelmed, anxious, angry. There's a lot of different feelings. And if they start getting frustrated, that's going to ramp up that anger, which takes a lot of energy. And they may feel guilty. They may feel ashamed. They may feel a lot of other dysphoric emotions. Hayes calls it dirty distress in acceptance and commitment therapy. But that's going to take a lot of their energy away from being able to keep going on their goal. That's going to deplete their energy reserves. Additionally, when people are in distress, that means they're in fight or flight. When they're in fight or flight, they're not in think and reason and learn, which means, it's going to be harder. Attention's going to be crap. Memory's going to be crap. It's going to be harder to achieve your goals. It's kind of like if you're trying to solve goals while you're in fight or flight, it's kind of like trying to run through 2 feet of water. When I was in high school, I lived in Florida, and we used to go to the beach and run on the beach in the wet sand, and some of the people who were stronger actually had to run down into the water a little bit because it would add resistance, but it took so much more energy for them to do that. We want to help people embrace the dialectics. That means embracing the good with the bad. Yes, you haven't reached your goal yet, and you have made these steps towards your goal, or these other things, even though they're not exactly your goal, have improved as a result of what you're doing. So encouraging them to embrace the dialectics. Yes, therapy takes time. Change takes time and energy, and you're having to devote time and energy to this. So you don't have as much time and energy for other things right now, and it's helping you move toward being the person you want to be. Again, encourage them to notice the positive. What's going right today? Cognitively, chunk it. We talked earlier about doing 15. Just get started. Get that initial oomph going so you're out of the starting gate, and then try to keep that momentum. When I was a runner, I used to have difficulty pacing myself. I know that's a big surprise to anybody who knows me. But I would, out of the starting gate, and I would just run all out. And by the end of the first quarter of the run, I'd start to get fatigued. And it took me a long time to learn how to pace myself so I could make it through the entire 10K at a relatively steady cadence, which was a whole lot more efficient than sprinting and walking and sprinting and walking. Encourage people to chunk what they're doing cognitively. If you don't have the ability to focus right now because you're kind of stressed out and in fight or flight, if you don't have the ability to focus for 30 minutes, do 10. Okay? Can you focus on this for 10 minutes or 5 minutes? And chunk those goals, even in their treatment plans, to be extremely manageable. What can you accomplish today? What can you do each day this week? I'd like you to do this. And it's something they can do. Generally, if somebody's really stressed out or really stuck, I try to keep it to something they can do in 15 minutes or less, because you have that whole do 15 thing. So when they come back the next week, I can say, wow, you did it. Awesome blossom. How does that feel? SMART goals with 2 S's is small and specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-limited goals. We want to make sure that we're, again, keeping those goals small so people can have successes. They can actually notice those baby steps that a lot of times we overlook. Write it down. Write down your goals so you know what you're working toward, and you can put reminders in your environment if you want to. Write down your fears and have people explore their fears about success, about failure, about trying this new intervention, whatever causes them anxiety, whatever causes them fear, have them write it down so you can explore that belief based on the facts in this context at this time, or FITCAT. That's the mnemonic I like. Facts in this context at this time. And help them develop distress-tolerant and empowering beliefs. Instead of, I can't do this right now, I can't do this whole thing by myself, so I will reach out for help. Or this, as it is, this task feels overwhelming, so I will break it down. I've done harder things before. Whatever phrases that they can use to counter their distress intolerant thoughts is going to be helpful, but it needs to be phrases that they believe. If their distress intolerant thought is, I suck as a human being and nobody will ever love me, then saying, I'm a lovable human being and everybody else can take a hike, that is not going to work. They don't believe it. Now, there's a lot about that first phrase that needs to be broken down and turned into objective statements. But my point being, make sure that they're not just repeating phrases that you gave them. They're repeating phrases that they actually believe. That'll make it a lot more impactful. And have them keep, you survived. That's another awesome distress-tolerant thought. Yeah, this stinks right now, but I've gotten through other situations. I've survived until now. Think about how much courage that took. One of my cousins went through a really bad episode with drugs and in and out of jail, prostitution. She survived a lot of things that I don't know that I could survive. I mean, she showed amazing strength, and she's been clean for over a decade now and is doing wonderfully, actually over 15 years now, and is doing wonderfully. And that took so much courage. Now when she hits roadblocks, she's able to draw on that strength and say, look at what I've survived until now and how far I've come. Keep a log of progress. This is important. I always encourage people to look at frequency, intensity, and duration. How often were you crying? How long did you cry for? And how hard were you crying? Were you just a little bit teary, or were you, ugly crying? All of those things can be sort of examined. And that's one of the measures I use for myself for grief. How many times did I ugly cry yesterday, and for how long? And as I notice the frequency, intensity, or duration improving, I see that as progress. Yeah, I may still be crying 5 times a day, but it's not ugly crying. I get misty. And that's progress. Ideal momentum. The client identifies the problem and is highly motivated to work on it. Don't we love it when a client comes in and is like this? During the first session, they actively participate. They're open and willing to hear constructive feedback and discuss suggestions. So it's a collaborative effort. Oh my gosh, the ideal client. The second session and beyond, the person thoroughly completes their homework, arrives on time, participates actively, and reports regular improvement. I didn't say constant improvement because nobody improves all the time, but it's regular. 2 steps forward, a half a step back. There's going to be a little ebb and flow, but we see progress. The reality, unfortunately, is people come in and they're highly motivated to have us fix it. They, doc, fix me, tell me what to do, give me a pill, whatever. It doesn't work that way. In the first session, the person participates, but often looks to us to do all the work. This is my problem. Now tell me how to make it better. And expects what is done in session to be enough. They think if they come and talk to me for an hour a week, that things are going to magically improve. And when you think about how many hours are in a week, you can see how if you're not using those skills, at least some of the other hours, they might not be able to be strengthened. The second session and beyond, the person rarely or partially completes homework. Here's a little warning sign. If they're not doing their homework, we need to get curious as to why. They don't have the time. They don't see the point. They don't think that that's going to work for them. What's keeping them from doing that? Or they don't understand why we're having them do it. Why is it that I want you to fill this worksheet out, 3 of these worksheets out every evening? That's what I do for cognitive distortions. And or it doesn't work for them the way that you have it. They're not a writer. They'd rather dictate. Okay, that's fine. Dictate then. I don't care. I just want to get it done. They participate passively, reporting problems, but don't draw connections or look for solutions. It's just like, hey, I'm here. Let me tell you all about how bad things went this week. And I don't know why they're going bad. And tell me how to fix it. And we really want to empower people to start figuring out the answers for themselves. We want to empower people to take charge of their life and their mental health. We need to expect plateaus in therapy in which gains seem to stall. And this is true even in child development. There are plateaus where kids, just kind of hit this place where they don't seem to be advancing too much, and then all of a sudden they have a growth spurt. Same thing is true for mental health. Change causes crisis, and when people have experienced crisis, they need time to restore and catch their breath. Like after you run a sprint, you may need time to jog or walk to catch your breath before you do the next sprint. A plateau lasting more than a month in which the person has not reached their goal should be explored. It may be they've got 16 other things that came up this month and they just don't have the energy to devote to it, so they're treading water. Okay, if that's true, let's, look at making some adjustments, but that's fine. Is something else going on and the client doesn't have the energy or resources to devote to the change right now? So we just talked about that. Or is the client just lost steam? They're only kind of halfway doing their assignments. They don't seem nearly as engaged. you can get that feeling. They don't walk out of there with these aha moments and this excitement about moving forward. It's just like, yeah, another day. And if they've lost steam, we need to explore why that is. What happened to their motivation? Where did that energy go? Where's that momentum going? Because momentum, it takes less energy to keep moving forward than to stop and start, but it takes energy to keep moving forward. So if they're losing energy, if they're losing steam, we need to understand why and look at physical, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive, and environmental factors that may be contributing. Do treatment plan objectives need to be changed? Maybe the client was focused on X, but then the city was battered by 2 successive major hurricanes. And, they're more worried about getting their basic needs, housing, food, clothing met, than working on cognitive behavioral worksheets. I get that. And in this era of e-therapy, it can be a little bit different. It used to be, back in the day, when you were seeing people in your office, you kind of knew what was going on around them. You knew if there was a hurricane coming and it was impacting you too. But these days, you may have a therapist in Wisconsin who's counseling somebody in Tampa, and they're aware of the hurricane, but they've never been through one and don't really realize the extent of what's going on. So they're having difficulty conceptualizing. We need to ask people, do we need to, put this on hold for a few minutes so you can tread water and attend to your more basic needs? Or do they need new skills and scaffolding? New skills are not something that people perfect right away. Just like learning to tie your shoes, it's not something you learn in one go round. And scaffolding is the behavior of the teacher that helps the person do what they can to, in this example, tie their shoes up until they can't do it anymore. And then the teacher will provide prompts, will provide assistance, will provide resources to help get them the rest of the way. Just like scaffolding helps when you're building a building. With interpersonal skills, this is a huge thing where people may not have the skills to empathize, may not have the skills to communicate assertively or not get defensive. So we may need to teach them these skills, but recognize that if they are out in the world and they start feeling threatened and they start getting defensive, this new skill that they just learned 5 hours ago isn't going to pop into their head. And they need scaffolding, which is why in session and even in worksheets and review worksheets, I will ask people, today, what situations caused you distress and what skills might you have been able to use? They may need a motivational boost. We may need to just go back to a decisional balance chart and ask them what the benefits and drawbacks are to change and really discuss that. Other causes of stuckness. The client has competing priorities. They want to start a new job, start a new family, and work on their depression and PTSD all at the same time. Yeah, that's just, in reality, that's pretty unrealistic because all 3 of those are really full-time kind of jobs. The client's not motivated to abandon old behaviors. Substance abuse, for example. They may see the problem, but they're afraid to let that go. They're not motivated to let that go yet because they don't have anything to replace it to help solve the pain. They may have wrong or incomplete problem or cause identification. They may think that their relationship issues are because they're overweight, and that has nothing to do with what's causing their relationship issues. It's that they are withdrawn and non-communicative. So losing weight ain't going to help in improving the relationship. So we need to help people make sure their goals are relevant. Goals are too broad, poorly defined, or complicated. I'm going to get in shape. Well, great. How are you going to do that? What does in shape mean to you? How are you going to know when you've achieved that? And what are the basic steps you're going to take? And it's important to help people really define these things. Just like when you write a recipe, you're very clear. It's a half a cup of sugar, a cup of flour. You're not saying, well, I do, which is what frustrates my daughter so much. But I'm a handful of this and a pinch of that. And she's like, I can't replicate that. There's no way I can make that cake based on what you just told me because all your stuff is too poorly defined. If the person doesn't feel heard or understood, if we start telling them how to fix their problem or what their problem is, they're most likely not going to be motivated, and it's going to be hard to get them to change. They're going to be stuck. They're not going to see the reason to exert the effort to climb out of the quicksand. The person isn't challenged through Socratic questioning to arrive at their own solutions. For example, the person may say, oh my gosh, I blew up at my boss today. I don't know why I did it. I know I should have kept my mouth shut, and that's all they say. So they're expecting us to say, this is why you blew up at your boss. Let's talk about that. And this is what you could have done. They're often expecting us to tell them how to fix the problem, maybe how to prevent the problem. In that case, we're giving them a fish instead of teaching them to fish, as they say. We're not teaching them to generalize behaviors, the skills they learn in counseling. So we may replay that, role play it in counseling in session, and they can do it just fine. But they're not able to do it in real life when they're under pressure. And we need to help people learn how to generalize that. How can you remember to use this skill? How can you recognize vulnerabilities for blowing up at your boss? Help them develop the tools they need. In terms of readiness for change, pre-contemplation, the person's just not ready. Contemplation, they're starting to realize there may be a problem, but they're still not ready to do anything about it. It's not bad enough. Preparation, they're trying to figure out what to do and decide if they're ready to change their behaviors. They're exploring their options. Action, they're ready to change. They're like, all right, I want to make this happen. So we help clients do the impossible by encouraging them to focus on prior successes and view what they're getting ready to do as a challenge. They may say, I've been addicted to alcohol or I've been depressed for 20 years and there's nothing that could change it. All right, well, it sounds like you're telling me that's impossible. So let's look at times in the past when even for an hour, even for a day, you haven't been depressed or you haven't been using. What's been different? And we can start building on that and encourage them to view it as a challenge. You haven't succeeded until now. It doesn't mean you won't succeed. Look at all these tools and skills and strengths you've developed up until now. And then in maintenance, you want to maintain progress on problem A while starting to work on problem B, because very rarely do people come in with just one problem. So for example, the person may get clean and then they need to stay clean while developing distress tolerance skills and healing their autonomic nervous system. And then they need to stay clean, use their distress tolerance skills, continue healing their autonomic nervous system, keep that in kind of treading water, and begin to address thinking errors related to past trauma. So they learn these foundation skills and then they build on them. It doesn't mean they lose them. They're building on them. Just like when you learned math. First you learned to add, then subtract, multiply, divide. Then you went to fractions. Oh my gosh. Then eventually they started throwing in Greek letters. Think about a change you wanted to make that lost its momentum. What happened? Why were the benefits of the new behavior not rewarding enough? What did you miss about the old behaviors? Change causes crisis and crisis causes change. I've said this a bunch of times today. Sometimes people approach therapy or change with a growth mindset. I can be successful. or I can be whatever. Or with a fixed mindset, I am depressed. I am an alcoholic. I am this. If I have a fixed mindset, it's going to be really hard to change. We want to examine the benefits of the old behaviors in each piece of the person's life: physical, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive, and environmental. We want to ensure the interventions meet the same need to a similar degree. For example, if they're using because it makes them happy or helps them relax, well, that's great. Now, just about anything you do that is not super addictive is probably not going to provide the same immediate gratification benefits of cocaine, for example. But when we look at the long-term benefits of helping you move towards your rich and meaningful life, are you willing to forego the initial rush for the temporary or for the long-term gains? We want to develop discrepancies between their current behaviors and their goals for their rich and meaningful life. Explore and address the drawbacks to change in each piece of their life. So yeah, there are drawbacks to change. There are reasons people don't want to give up emotional eating, addictive behaviors, even anxious thoughts or guilt or grief. We want to explore what those are and discuss those with the client. And then increase the frequency and or intensity of rewards for the new behavior. Sometimes it may just not be rewarding enough. So we need to help them get that momentum going by putting that carrot out there. If the problem is incomplete problem identification, help the person examine the problem as it relates to each piece of their life. For example, depression. How is it impacting you physically, interpersonally, emotionally, cognitively, and environmentally? Now, if you woke up tomorrow or 6 months from now and your depression were gone, what would be different physically, interpersonally, emotionally, cognitively, and environmentally? So you're helping them identify where they're at right now and how this thing is causing them problems and what would be different if they got rid of this problem. Examine what the person hopes to get out of change. If they're getting into treatment for depression so they can feel happier, well, that's great. If they're getting into treatment for depression because they think that that will make their spouse come back, that's probably not accurate. That may be part of the problem, but my guess is there's a lot more to it. So expecting that, going to treatment for 12 weeks for depression and your spouse is going to return, it's probably setting yourself up for failure. If the person doesn't feel heard or understood, they may yes but us. And we've all heard that. Yeah, but, instead, or if you hear that, just respond with, okay, I'm wondering what you think would work best, or what has worked for you to address this in the past. I don't have all the answers. Now, I don't put that part on there, but we want to make sure we're empowering the client. If they're saying yes, but there's something that's keeping them from engaging with that idea. If they repeat the same issue, we may say something like, I've noticed this issue keeps coming up. Help me understand what I'm missing or what you want to change that hasn't changed. It's clearly something that's important because you keep bringing it up. So let's focus on that for a minute. Or if the person just totally shuts down, we may say, it seems like you might be on the verge of giving up. Tell me what you see as the most important issue to address right now and how you want it to resolve eventually. And then what's the first step? What's one thing you could do today to start moving toward that resolution? If the client's motivation wanes, we want to recognize if we started expecting too much too fast, the interventions were implemented too quickly, or too many at once. Keep it simple, silly. That's so important. Sometimes we do, but a lot of times we don't give enough credit to how much energy it takes to change. We just expect that, hey, I'm motivated to change, it's going to happen. No, it takes work. The interventions may be being presented in the wrong order or target the wrong issue. For example, If you start addressing trauma issues, and I've seen this done, it just, makes my skin crawl. Addressing trauma issues before the person has distress tolerance or emotion regulation skills, then that's not going to help. If you start trying to address that trauma, the person may be going, I ain't going there because I'm terrified of opening Pandora's box and you haven't given me any skills to deal with it yet. Or the interventions are incomplete. Maybe they target the person's depressed and all of your interventions target their cognitions, but not their interpersonal skills or their physical vulnerabilities like sleep deprivation or poor nutrition or alcohol abuse. So we need to look biopsychosocially at the individual. In terms of homework, clients must understand the importance of homework. Why are we asking them to do it? They need to understand the importance of baseline and monitoring so they can see gradual improvements and we can intervene early to prevent relapse. If they're keeping those journals, then if they start to get stuck or if they start to backslide, we can look at the journals and say, what changed? Or what was different when you were moving forward and doing well, and make adjustments accordingly. They need to understand the importance of daily application of the new tools to strengthen memory connections and their own effectiveness. As they say, neurons that fire together, wire together. Would you want to jump off a building holding on to a piece of thread or holding on to a piece of bungee cord or something that had 150 ply on it? And obviously I'm not a rock climber, so I don't, but you get my point. If you've only done something once, then that's pretty weak. If you've done something 150 times, then it's starting to become part of your repertoire. And we need to help them understand the importance of prioritizing doing the work to achieve recovery as they define it, not as we define it. Why do they want to achieve the goal? How does prioritizing whatever this homework is that we're asking them to do help you move towards your goals more efficiently? And what needs to happen so you can remember to do these activities outside of session? Do you need to set an alarm? Do you need to schedule SMS messages? Do you need to post, right on your mirror to do it so you remember when you're right before you go to bed? What do you need to do? We must remember to follow up on homework. Just like when we were in school, if the teacher told us to do homework and never collected it, then we probably stopped doing it because we're like, what's the point? The same thing is true for therapy. We need to, if we're going to assign it, if we're going to have them take their time to do it, we need to respect the value of their time by going over it with them in session. Tailor the homework to meet the client's learning needs. Some people like to do prose writing. Some people prefer lists. Some people like to dictate. Some people like to write. Some people like freeform. Some people like worksheets, fill in the blank. Some people prefer videos. Some people prefer books. Talk with your client because these little nuances are going to make a huge difference. And keep it short. The total time each day, including logging and mindfulness activities, etc., probably shouldn't exceed 1 hour unless they're in residential. And help them figure out how to work it into their daily routine, such as doing their mindfulness worksheets in the morning while they're drinking their coffee and in the evening while they're winding down before bed. Or listening to an audio recording of a book on the way to work or at the gym. So they're getting the information, but it's, they're working it into their day. They're doubling up. By using Socratic questioning, clients strengthen the memory pathways to trigger using the skills on their own. So instead of saying, I see you blew up at your boss because I can see that you were totally overwhelmed, I would say, so why do you think you reacted the way you did when your boss said that to you? Encourage them to look introspectively for vulnerabilities that cause them to act that way so they can prevent them in the future. What skills do you have that you think might have been useful in that situation? How might it have helped if you would have used those skills? What would have been the benefit to using your assertiveness or to, taking a break? And how do you think you can help yourself remember to try that skill in the future? 3 steps to a breakthrough. Define your goal and make each step rewarding. Develop your change plan, learning from prior experiences. And increase and regularly refresh your motivation interpersonally, emotionally, cognitively, environmentally. Change requires a certain amount of momentum. We need to get going, and then we need to keep going in order to change. Otherwise, it's just an episode. We need to examine why prior attempts at change have failed and explore why and what can be done to address it. We need to make sure goals are small, specific, measurable, accurate, realistic, and time-limited. As clients learn new skills and ways of responding, it's vital to practice them daily without expecting immediate perfection. Even if I'm using my distress tolerance skills, I may not be 100% effective, but I'm trying. Sometimes motivation and compliance can be increased with social support, environmental reminders of changes, identifying and regularly reviewing the benefits of change, as well as the drawbacks to the old behavior, and logging and reviewing progress on a daily or reviewing it at least on a weekly basis. Thank you all for being with me today. Are there any questions? Hello, Philip. Hello, Stacy. You're quite welcome, Alyssa. Have a great day. Hello, Alita. I am glad the videos are helpful. Please, everybody share far and wide. Even if somebody doesn't like the hour videos, they can always listen to 15 minutes, then pause it. And I do have shorter videos on the YouTube channel as well for people who really just only have 15 in them. You are quite welcome, Lori. It's always good to see you. Hello, Kira. Hope things are well in your world. Hello, Elakau. Lori asked, what about someone with depression with sleep disturbances due to bad dreams? There may be things that you can do to address them kind of concurrently. The first thing might be exploring their trauma history, what's causing those bad dreams, exploring when the dreams began. So I'd really kind of look at those dreams as a starting point to figure out if there was a precipitating event, because we know that depression increases with sleep deprivation, and that's going to be a major issue. If you can't identify anything kind of obvious that may be contributing to the nightmares and the sleep disorders, it's always an option to refer them out for a sleep study to see if there's something else going on. It's possible to help them do some journaling before bed, do some relaxation exercises before bed to maybe get their mind in a different place. That may not do all of it, but part of it also depends on what the client is really interested in working on. Are they interested in what are they more motivated to work on right now? Figuring out what's causing their bad dreams and getting better sleep, or dealing with whatever their depressive symptoms are. And again, you may not be able to separate the two. And certainly sleep hygiene is going to be important. Doctors also may be able to provide medications. SSRIs actually are known for suppressing dreams. Not that I'm a huge fan of SSRIs, but they've hypothesized that one of the reasons that SSRIs are effective in depression is because they do suppress dreaming, and which I found to be curious, but what do I know? Alrighty, everybody, have an amazing day, and I will see you next week, Wednesday, same time, same station.